Welcome to the reading of the Sabbath School lesson for the second quarter of 2022. Welcome to Lesson 1 from the series on Genesis, titled The Creation. This lesson is ready for teaching on April 2, and my name's Percy Harrold. Sunday, March 27, The God of Creation. Read Psalm 100, verses 1 to 3. What is the human response to the God of creation, and why? Psalm 100, beginning at verse 1. Make a joyful shout to the Lord, all you lands. Serve the Lord with gladness. Come before his presence with singing. Know that the Lord, he is God, and it is he who has made us, and not we ourselves. We are his people, and the sheep of his pasture. In Genesis chapter 1, the first message of the creation account is God. We hear it in the translation, "In the beginning God," in Genesis 1 verse 1. In the first line, Genesis 1 verse 1, the word God is placed in the middle of the verse and is underlined by the strongest accent in the Hebrew liturgical traditional chanting in order to emphasize the importance of God. The creation text begins, then, with an emphasis on God, the author of creation. The book of Genesis begins, in fact, with two different presentations of God. The first creation account in Genesis 1, verse 1 through to chapter 2, verse 4, presents God as infinitely far from humans, the transcendent God, Elohim, whose name speaks of the supremacy of God. The name Elohim denotes preeminence and strength, and the use of the plural form of the word Elohim expresses the idea of majesty and transcendence. The second creation account in Genesis 2, verses 4 to 25, presents God as up close and personal, the immanent God, Yahweh, whose name many believe denotes closeness and relationship. The creation text as a whole is then an implicit appeal to worship God. First, to be aware of God's infinite grandeur and power, and at the same time to acknowledge our dependence on him because he created us and not we ourselves, as it says in Psalm 100 verse 3. This is why many of the Psalms often associate worship with creation, as we read in Psalm 95, verses 1 to 6, "O come, let us sing to the Lord. Let us shout joyfully to the rock of our salvation. Let us come before his presence with thanksgiving. Let us shout joyfully to him with psalms. For the Lord is the great God, and the great King above all gods. In his hand are the deep places of the earth. The heights of the hills are his also. The sea is his, for he made it, and his hands formed the dry land. O come, let us worship and bow down. Let us kneel before the Lord, our Maker." And in Psalm 139, verses 13 and 14, "For you formed my inward parts. You covered me in my mother's womb. I will praise you, for I am fearfully and wonderfully made. Marvelous are your works, and that my soul knows very well." And we'll compare that with Revelation 14, verse 7. "Saying with a loud voice, Fear God, and give glory to him, for the hour of his judgment has come, and worship him who made heaven and earth, the sea, and the springs of water." This twofold view of a God who is both majestic and powerful, and who also is close, loving, and in a relationship with us, makes an important point about how we should approach God in worship. Awe and reverence go along with joy and the assurance of God's proximity, forgiveness, and love. As we read in Psalm 2, verse 11, "Serve the Lord with fear, and rejoice with trembling." Even the sequence of the two presentations of God is meaningful. The experience of God's proximity and the intimacy of his presence follows the experience of God's distance. Only when we have realized that God is great shall we be able to appreciate his grace and enjoy in trembling his wonderful and loving presence in our lives. And so to finish today, Think about the vast power of God, who upholds the cosmos and yet can be so near to each of us. Why is this amazing truth so amazing? This lesson was read by Dr. Percy Harrold for Christian Services for the Blind. Sponsored by the Sabbath School Department and distributed through Hope Channel Australia, this podcast is also redistributed by Hope Channel Germany, Christian Record Services for the Blind, and It Is Written. It is also available on SoundCloud and through multiple podcast distributors, including Apple iTunes. Remember, God is always faithful.